Good morning, everyone. Molly Grover from the Dubuque Area Chamber of Commerce on behalf of my colleagues. Welcome to our monthly Power Hour. It's a beautiful Tuesday morning, and we're in for a real treat with Michael Leytem this morning. But before we get started, it is my pleasure to introduce our sponsor and MC this morning. He is a friend. He is a neighbor. He is a neighbor in our building and a friend to the chamber. He is a board member as well, Mr. Justin Stinson. Justin, I'm going to turn it over to you so you can introduce our special guest this morning. Justin.
Thank you so much, Molly. It's a pleasure to be here. And thank you. Good morning to all of you that are on this. It's exciting to be part of the Chamber's virtual Power Hour program. As Molly stated, I'm Justin Stinson. I'm the Vice President and General Manager for IMON Communications. And we are a proud sponsor of Power Hour, along with Anderson Window and Door, Hotel Julian, the Friedman Group, and Statera Integrated Health and Wellness. We're excited that you chose to join us this morning for a very timely presentation, Catching Leadership During Times of Adversity. I also want to throw out a special welcome back to the 2020 Leadership Debut class. It's good to be back. So at IMON, we're excited to be a local provider delivering high-speed internet, data, and phone services to businesses throughout Dubuque. We continue to expand our service footprint as well as our product offerings, and we take great pride and responsibility in being recognized as an essential business during this pandemic time. We've worked tirelessly with the local communities that we serve, and we provide access to people who are underserved in each of those communities. In addition, we've also created some public Wi-Fi locations. These have helped children and college students finish their homework. They have allowed people to apply for jobs, apply for unemployment, or get additional assistance. We've also had the opportunity to work with a number of nonprofits to support their mission. This type of reaction is already built into our company culture, and always has been. It wasn't asked of our employees. It was our employees doing, and then the company jumping in to help in many instances. As a company, we continue to aggressively build out our network, and because we know that now more than ever in the history of time, the world relies on a reliable connection to get their information, stay in contact with family and friends, or even do work remotely. So with IMON, you can always expect a great experience, a great connection, and an active community partner. Our June presenter, Michael Leytem, has been a leadership coach and talent management consultant for nearly a decade. He's worked with hundreds of Fortune 500 leaders to customize talent strategies, leadership solutions, and coaching to promote personal and professional growth. As a published academic with an MA in industrial organizational psychology, Michael has studied the mental processes and social pressures that influence effective leadership. His lifelong passion for leadership, psychology, and mindfulness transcends throughout his work and interactions with others. Postgraduate school, Michael began his career working for SkyTrain as a full-time employee, where he was able to gain valuable experience observing, providing feedback, and coaching leaders of all levels. Following his tenure at SkyTrain, Michael joined KPMG's People and Change practice, where he served as a manager of talent management. During his time at KPMG, Michael was able to gain a better understanding of the unique drivers and customized solutions that yield the greatest impact for business in the digital age. More recently, Michael has founded his own company and begun authoring an original manuscript titled Catching Leadership, which launched in March of 2020, combining elements of leadership, psychology, and mindfulness. Michael has developed and trademarked the Catch and Release, spelled C-A-T-C-H, and release model of leadership. As an individual with great passion for development, Michael seeks to understand the specific challenges, strengths, and development areas of each professional he coaches. Leveraging his own strengths, finder profile of developer, empathy, futuristic, positivity, and connectedness, Michael leaves a lasting impression on those he works with. So please welcome Michael.
Well, thank you so much, Justin and Molly, for that warm introduction. That was very kind of you. I'm going to share my screen here, so just bear with me for 1 second. Let me see. There we go, show my screen. Okay, let me get into presenter view. Okay, let's rock and roll. So thanks again for that warm introduction. Like Justin said, my name is Michael Leytem. I'm originally from the Dubuque County area, and I just authored my first book called Catching Leadership, and I was planning to come back and do a virtual book tour. And obviously things changed for all of us pretty drastically in March and April. So I am happy to have this virtual opportunity to talk a little bit about the book, but also to talk about leading through adversity and what you and your organization can be thinking about to help prepare you and help you better navigate these challenging times. So with that being said, Justin did a good job giving my background, and I don't want to spend too much time on here, but I think it is important to highlight a couple of things. So first off, my background's in psychology, and it's funny that being a Hawkeye, I love the Hawkeyes, I love Iowa, so big Hawkeye fan, but studying psychology in undergrad was interesting because I had a lot of people who were in the quote unquote hard sciences or engineering who used to ask me, Michael, what are you going to do with your degree? What kind of job are you going to get? And it's pretty funny how it's come full circle now that those individuals who went off and became individual contributors, had high technical skills, they're the same people calling me up now saying, I'm leading people, Michael, I need help with this leadership thing, it's really tricky. So I'm kind of starting to have a little bit of my moment in the sun based on what I studied back in the day and some of my career goals that I've been able to accomplish. I love people. I've loved connecting and trying to help people. And so for me, it was, how do I find a career path that I can bring that to people in the workplace? It's probably the place that people are most stressed. They spend a lot of time. So that led me to go get my master's at Minnesota State in Mankato in industrial organizational psychology, which is just a long kind of terminology for business psychology. I do deal with a lot of workplace issues. I deal with leadership, training, selection, cultural, organizational change, development, etc. So as Justin said, I started with a boutique firm, SideTrain in Ohio, and that was great because I was able to get some leadership coaching and feedback experience very early on in my career, mid-20s to late 20s. I was able to get exposure to things that a lot of people probably that early in their career don't get. And I knew that I really liked this leadership thing. I really liked seeing effective leadership. I really liked having conversations and helping people grow. But I also knew that I was a little bit limited in just staying with a small company and only seeing kind of that side of the house. It was great experience. I wore a lot of different hats, but I needed to kind of step up into the big leagues. So that led me into KPMG, which is one of the big four accounting firms who has a consulting branch to it that focuses on people and change management, talent management. So this really expanded my horizons in a lot of ways. It was able to allow me to see large-scale organizational challenges, some of the different cultures, different industries, and it really helped my business acumen, which is really important when you become a leadership coach, that you don't just have kind of the people side of things, but you also need to understand the business side of things. So this led me to last July. I'm coming up on my 1-year anniversary of launching my own company and launching the book Catching Leadership in March. And just on a personal note, my wife and I, we live up in Lake Arrowhead, California. It's this beautiful private lake up in the San Bernardino Mountains. I do a ton of fishing, hiking, play a little bit of bass guitar, and I've really been getting into more mindfulness. So that is a little bit about me. And let's see if I can get the next slide to go. There we go. Okay, the elephant in the room. There's a reason why you're all here today. And maybe it was something that you had planned that you wanted to do for your own personal growth, but my guess is dealing with all the adversity, all the challenges, we have a lot going on. It has been very challenging for leaders. And before I move on to touch on any of those topics, I wanted to see if Justine would be able to pull up a poll that I pre-populated to kind of better understand what the greatest challenge you or your organization is currently facing. So Justine, if you can pull that up and help me out there, that would be great.
I was able to put it in the chat function, so everyone will look at that first for the question and the answers will follow. And they can just type in a letter that they'd like.
Okay. So I'm going to read the question and I'll read the responses. And then if you could just answer in the chat box, whether it's A, B, C, or D for you. So the question is, What has been the greatest leadership challenge you have experienced the last few months? And the options I have here are A, leading a virtual environment, B, dealing with uncertainty, C, concerns about maintaining sales and productivity, D, having to make difficult workforce decisions, or E, other. So take a few seconds and then type in which of those letters best describes your situation. Okay, I'm seeing some B's, C.
Some B's, D's, A, someone's a B and an E. A lot of B's.
Okay. Well, you can feel free to let those responses coming in. Emma, who's joined, she's part of my team. She's going to look at those, and then at the end, I'll be able to kind of summarize what the most common answer was. So let's talk about a leader's environment and how it's changing. The funny thing about this slide is I was using it before COVID. I was using it before the Black Lives Matters movement and all of the kind of recent developments there. And I don't know, maybe there's something I need to do, make these arrows a little bit bigger, but these all still hold true today. So digitalization is going up. We know that. You've probably been on more virtual calls in the last couple of months than you've been on your entire life. That is a huge change and likely one that is going to stay in some form or fashion in the future. Disruption. Every major institution, every single one is being disrupted right now. You think about things in healthcare, you think about publishing, newspapers. I mean, literally, you think of anything, things are being disrupted. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. Change can be good, it offers opportunities, but it also can be stressful as a leader to navigate all that disruption. And then distractions. Distractions have been on the rise for a long time with how interconnected we are to our phone and technology. And I think now with everything even being an election year, there's a lot of triggering posts people will find online on social media. And, you know, how far do you go down a rabbit hole in anything? And does it take some of your mental and emotional resources? So as a leader, you need to be thinking about distractions and be more intentional with where you focus your time and energy. So if those things are on the rise, naturally some things are on the decline. So the first one happens to be simplicity. Remember when things were simple? I feel like still being a young man in my age, I feel like down the road, I'm going to be talking to people about the simple times and how life was before COVID or how life was before cell phones or whatever it might be. But it seems like we're all kind of yearning maybe for a little bit more simplicity because the world doesn't seem very simple at the moment. Stability is down. I mean, wouldn't everybody love to know, you know, what is going to happen next, but we just don't. And then connection. It's great that we're able to connect virtually. And like I said, I'm super grateful for this opportunity, but you know, what would have been maybe a little bit better for my soul is to meet you people in person, to shake your hand, maybe give someone a hug. I think all of us are, you know, leaders included, are missing some of that connection for our own emotional support and our own mental well-being. So as I was traveling around as a consultant, I started paying attention to various leadership theories, various leadership books. I started paying attention to what corporate trainers were covering, and I started to notice this theme that there are a lot of hidden aspects of leadership that don't really get talked about too much. So usually when we think about leadership, especially in the business world, we think about what we can see, right? What's on the surface. So what are some strong leadership behaviors? You know, what is the communication that leader gave? What are the leader-follower interactions? What kind of maybe culture is there? Or, you know, how do things get done? How do decisions get made? Which is all really, really good stuff. It's great to go attend a course on how to have a difficult conversation because as a leader, you're going to have many difficult conversations. But I also noticed that these corporate trainers or these programs were kind of tiptoeing around other types of issues that are very, very important to leadership. And I don't exactly know why in the corporate world it's not talked about. I have a couple of, you know, ideas, but it's all the things that are kind of below the surface. And let me see if I can get this next. There we go. The things we can't see, the thoughts, the feelings, the motivations, the mental health. And as leaders are taking on more and more, and as they're dealing with more adversity, ambiguity, etc., it's important that they have the resources to stay agile, to take care of their minds, to let go of things. And so I thought, okay, what is missing from leadership and how can I come up with a unique perspective? And that's what led me to write the book, Catching Leadership. So the tagline is the art of letting go and hooking into leadership through catch and release, which is the model, like Justin said, that I trademarked. And each chapter in the book goes through each one of these dimensions. I'm going to talk more about that here in a second. This journey was really fulfilling for me personally. It was challenging. I know a lot of people have aspirations to write a book. I would encourage you to just get started and just do it, because you will learn so much about yourself and you will learn so much about how to communicate your thoughts and ideas when you actually have to put pen down to paper. It's easy to have ideas and thoughts about what great leadership looks like. It's much harder to actually put those into words and to tie it all together. So I started this process, I don't know, 3 years ago, and I was working on it whenever I got free time on the weekends or on the evenings. And I really just started to kind of fall in love with it. My heart would start racing when I was writing part of this, and I knew that it was just a passion of mine. So with that being said, let's dive into what is at the core of Catching Leadership. And it is this catch and release model. So there are 6 dimensions within the model, and they're each of the chapters, like I mentioned. But within those 6 dimensions, there are 34 leadership constructs. So each chapter has a unique combination of those leadership constructs that make up that larger scale dimension. But that wasn't enough. I didn't want to just create a book to say, this is leadership according to Michael, you should all listen, right? Even though I might think that book's great, I don't know how many of you would necessarily think that book is great. So I wanted to provide some value up front for my readers. And I created a free leadership assessment that I invite all of you to take. It's on my website, and I'll have a link to that resource at the end of this presentation. But there's 120 5-point Likert items. It takes about 15 minutes to take. And once you complete that assessment, you will get scores based on each of these 6 dimensions. You'll also get an overall score for the catch and release model. And I'm going to go into what each of these dimensions mean, but the scores will basically give you a cutoff as a low, medium, and high for each of these dimensions. And I would just encourage you to use this as a data point for you to help guide maybe some new leadership topics or areas that you want to work on. Leverage your strengths on it, maybe try and fill in some of the gaps. But what got you here won't get you there. You've heard of that saying before. So when it comes to leadership, the same rule applies. The same good old school wisdom that you've been applying to your leadership practice, that's great, and it's probably got you to where you're at. But as the world continues to shift, you're going to have to embrace new tools, and this is one of them. So let's talk about the model itself, this beautiful picture of the lake to the right. So I use fishing metaphors, and people might ask, why fishing? I don't know anything about fishing. Why would I care? What's fishing about? Well, if you know anything about human psychology, you know that people need really catchy things to embrace for memory, right? They need mnemonics. They need things that are easy to grasp. And so the last thing that I wanted to bring into this world was a dry academic book that had these, big words and terminology that people would get lost. I thought, how can I make this very personable, but still get at some of those academic concepts? So this is the model I came up with, and I'll go through it first from a fishing metaphor standpoint, and then I'm going to break this down from an organizational standpoint and what it means for you and what you can be thinking about within your own organization. So chapter 1 is titled Cast Your Line. And cast your line is all about getting into the leadership game, casting yourself out there. You have to learn how to practice, how to cast different techniques. Just like in leadership, there are different situations that will require different leadership behaviors. In fishing, there are different types of casting techniques that will allow you to get into different pieces of cover or different pockets of water to where the fish might be. So this is all about you walking the walk, going down the dock, and learning and practicing leadership first before you jump into a boat. And a boat, of course, is symbolic for leadership. And you've probably heard even that metaphor before. Who are you bringing along in your boat with you as a leader? And so that leads me to the second chapter, which is attract diverse anglers. Now you are in a leadership role. You're responsible for other people. You're responsible for the safety of this vessel. Who are you going to surround yourself with in your interactions? Sometimes you don't necessarily have a choice if it comes to your direct reports, but a lot of times leaders do have a choice in who they can surround themselves with. And anglers is just another word for fishermen, which in the book just stands for leaders. Anglers are leaders out there trying to catch leadership. And so when it comes to attracting diverse anglers, you want other people who are motivated to grow, motivated to lead. And that's what you share in common. But you should also be attracting people who are different than you. They should look different than you. They should have different experiences than you. They should, maybe like different political parties than you. That's great. It keeps us all somewhat centered. It checks our biases. We learn from them and they learn from us, and it creates this very inclusive environment. So that's what the second dimension is all about. Then we move on to the third one, which is called tie their knot. And this is very interesting for leaders who have to make this transition from being an individual contributor to now leading big teams. And it's great when you're catching fish yourself, when you're making sales, when you're being productive and you can control everything. But that's not leadership. Leadership is about being willing to put your own pole down to tie someone else's knot so that they can get in the leadership game too. And it can cause a lot of cognitive dissonance or discomfort mentally because you're thinking in the short term, I could be having more success than training or onboarding this person right now. But if you want to scale, long term, you need to be willing to tie other people's knots around you. But tying their knot alone is not enough. You can't just say, I checked that box, I tied their knot, sink or swim, that's how I had to figure it out. You need to be willing as a leader to start coaching their cast. And it's not coaching them to be just like you. I think sometimes leaders get that wrong. You need to coach them to their own skill sets. You need to unlock their own uniqueness and bring out the best in them. So you coach their own casting techniques and the way that they can be most productive on the water. After coaching their cast, we move on to honor their catch. This seems pretty straightforward and it seems like it would be something that's easy for leaders to do, but it's actually quite challenging because we're all humans. And so honoring their catch is all about, now you've brought this person along, you've invested a ton of time and resources in this individual, they become successful. Are you humble enough as a leader to not need that recognition, to not say, but look, I'm the one who tied their knot, I'm the one who coached their cast, I invested in them, what about me? But you truly can just be happy for them, even if they surpass your own success. Because the definition of a great leader is someone who can develop other leaders around them, who can even surpass their own leadership capabilities. You don't want to keep people underneath you as a leader. I think sometimes leaders get threatened. You want to honor their catch, you want to bring them up, build them up. But the last step is my favorite, and it's the one that makes this model the most unique, and that's the release. So the release is all about, how do you let go of all of the unserving things, all the baggage, all the labels that you've collected along this process? Because leadership's hard work. You're going to fail. Things are going to sting once in a while. And you need to become more mindful. You need to take care of your mental health. You need to learn how to stay mentally agile so that you can navigate when these unexpected or adverse times come up. So that's why I use the fishing metaphors to help people remember some of those concepts of leadership. But what I want to talk about is more your organization, your teams, and what this means for you and how you can apply this model to your own work environment. So when we start with cast your line, understand your skill set and lead by example. Think of this as Leadership 101. It is your new manager training program. When you just promote someone and they're a first-time manager, what resources are you giving them? What training? What mentorship? They need to have something to help them get off the ground and be successful. So most large organizations have strong new manager type programs, but some smaller organizations, they kind of think, well, they'll learn as they go and I'll kind of keep an eye on them. But you really need to be strategic on how are you setting that person up for success to be a leader right off the bat. The second step, attract diverse anglers. Think of this, and I can't think of a better time than right now as your diversity and inclusion initiatives or objectives at your organization. I mean, this is a historic moment that we're all living through right now. And I can't think of a better time to have the honest conversations that people need to have about inclusion and about diversity. So use this time in your organization to hit the pause button and to really consider, are we being as inclusive as we can be? Is our culture really where we want it to be? Or do we need to make some changes? Let's do that. So think of that in terms of attract diverse anglers. We move on to the third one, tie their knot. This is your onboarding program. It's really funny, but there's a lot of statistics to back this up, that a person, a new employee, will make determinations about their tenure and how long they're going to stay at a company, usually within the first few weeks or months. If they don't get the warm fuzzies in their stomach and they're already thinking, oh man, this place, I don't know about it, they're going to be leaving in a year or two probably. And it's not on them. I know it's easy to label, millennials or people aren't loyal like they used to be. No, organizations need to up their game. They need to keep their talented employees there. They need to be providing developmental opportunities and all of those great things that will keep talent where they're at. The next step, coach their cast, seems pretty straightforward, but this is about building a coaching culture. And that's something I'm helping a client with right now in Chicago. They are a very nice, they have a very nice culture, but they don't want to have the difficult conversations. They don't want to provide that feedback that's hard to deliver, but they want this coaching culture. They want to really promote development. So I'm helping their leadership teams really think about, how do you become a great coach? How do you objectively capture behavior? And then how do you deliver it in a meaningful way that promotes growth? So does your organization right now have a coaching culture? Does it prioritize development or does it not? The next step, honor their catch. Think of this in terms of employee recognition. So yes, it's important to have competitive compensation and bonuses. Yes, that's important. Those are kind of table stakes when it comes to retaining talent. But I'm talking even more than that. I'm talking about, when was the last time you wrote a handwritten note to thank someone in your company? When's the last time you wrote that email? It took you 5 or 10 minutes to write, but it was heartfelt and it made a difference in that employee because you were willing to honor their catch and not get caught up in the, I'm really busy, I'm behind on a lot of things. Yeah, they're doing a good job, but they know they're doing a good job. And I'm not talking about participation awards. I'm not talking about going around and doing this to everyone across the board, but I am talking about being surgical and strategic about recognizing when people are doing a good job. And you all know how that feels when someone recognizes hard work and gives you a compliment or gives you a handwritten note. That can boost morale in ways that monetary incentives sometimes can't. And then the last step, the release, this is your organizational mindfulness or wellness programs. So right now, more than ever, people are struggling, their mental health, whether it's increased anxiety or depression. But what are you as an organization willing to do to help people navigate these times? Are there different incentives, different programs? Are there different resources or coaches that you're going to let your employees start working with so that they can release some of these unserving thoughts, they can release some of this baggage, and they can kind of navigate and breathe through all of the stress that they're dealing with right now. So hopefully that helps spark some different thoughts with your organization. What I want to do right now in the chat is similar to what we did before with the poll. Based on these 6 steps, so your leadership 101, new manager training, your diversity and inclusion, number 2, onboarding, number 3, coaching culture, number 4, employee recognition, number 5, and then mindfulness/wellness with number 6. I want you in the chat function to write down where you see the greatest opportunity right now for your team or your organization as it sits today. So just write a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, or 6 in the chat box. I'll give you a couple more seconds. Okay. So we will revisit those along with the poll questions here at the end when we get into the Q&A. So the last piece of the catching leadership model that I wanted to talk about with you today was the legacy of leadership framework. So I don't necessarily expect you to remember all of those dimensions, the 6 dimensions, but if you really think about leadership and boil it down to its simplest terms, this is what I came up with. So it's achieving results, it's developing others, and it's developing yourself. And so right now, as you look at this on your screen, I either want you to do one of 2 things. I want you to either draw these 3 circles out on a piece of paper right next to you. Or if you don't have a piece of paper next to you, I want you to look at the screen and point to where at on this diagram you find yourself operating the majority of your time. Where do you spend the most of your time as a leader? The reason why I bring this up is because a lot of times when we talk about leadership, there are these comfort zones. And I label these the comfort zones of leadership. And we can confuse ourselves as leaders when we're between two of these circles, any two of these circles, that I'm a great leader because I'm doing these things. But to really grow and to build a legacy of leadership, you do need a combination of all three, and you want to try and center yourself in this model as much as you can. So let's talk about the comfort zones just real briefly. Someone who is achieving results and developing themselves, but they're very independent, they're in what I call the zone of autonomy. So they have a high degree of independence, prioritizing personal results and self-development, but they largely neglect the development of others. So maybe they're not this person who's out there proactively coaching others. They don't like to necessarily interact. Maybe they're a little bit more introverted or whatever it might be for that individual, but they can hang their hat on the fact that I'm getting results done and I'm doing things to constantly grow myself. The zone of dependence on the other side of the equation is someone who really likes developing other people. They like achieving results too, but kind of more in a team setting, getting things done together as a team. But these are the type of individuals who, I don't have enough time in the day. I can't develop myself. They neglect their own development. And so they run the risk of burnout, and they don't really take care of themselves. They can't find that piece of the equation in their own leadership practice. The last piece then is the zone of development. So these are the individuals, they love the self-development stuff. They read a ton of self-help books. They love developing others and coaching others, but they're not actually achieving the results that maybe the organization needs. So from a metric standpoint, maybe they fall short in their sales numbers or whatever it might be. And so what I want you to think about really and reflect on is, where are you at and where is an opportunity for you to be a better leader right now? Which one of those circles? How can you center yourself through this model better? Okay, so that was the model, but now I want to talk about just some practical advice when dealing with adversity. And some of this stuff is probably not going to be brand new to you, but it will be a good refresh for you and hopefully will help kind of set your mindset in the right place it needs to be as you go on and tackle these challenges that you're facing. So the first one is, during times of adversity, focus inward first so you can lead outwardly. This kind of goes against servant leadership to a degree, and I'm a big fan of servant leadership personally, but I don't think that in times of real adversity, when leaders are struggling to keep their head above water and they're in this firefighter mode, that neglecting their own physical, mental, and emotional needs is good for them. When you have a bunch of people coming to you and they want answers and they want everything, and you're just in this reactive mode, putting these fires out, you are at a very high risk of burnout. You're neglecting your mental health, you're cluttered, you're scared, you're reactive. What I would encourage you to do is try and prioritize your mental health when you know times are getting tough. Think about ways that you can be more mindful, whether that's through meditation, journaling, whether it's prayer, whether it's working out, whatever it is for you. There's no one answer for you because you're a unique individual, but you need to become clear, confident, and strategic because people need your leadership more than ever, and they need it to be thoughtful and proactive. So the first piece of advice is focus inward first. And I know it's tough as a leader because you have all of these other people that you're taking care of, but if your head's not on straight first and you don't have a clear head and you're not able to, you're actually going to probably cause more harm than good when you're running around there putting out all those fires. The second piece of advice is listen to understand, not to respond. This is probably the most underrated leadership skill that I see across the board in organizations. Leaders by nature, they're problem solvers. They like to do things, they like to fix problems and innovate and create. What they don't necessarily like to do, or they're not as comfortable with, is just sitting, pausing, and listening, just to listen, to show empathy, to be there for their employees. That's what employees need right now. They need to feel like they're being heard, not just where are the magical answers to this, unprecedented time. So let them know that you have their back, even if you don't have their answers, and be willing to set up time to just chat with your employees with no agenda, but just to listen to better understand them. The next piece of advice is be honest in your communication. It is okay to say, I don't know. How are any of us as leaders prepared to deal with a pandemic and some of the social things that are going on right now. You might not have an answer this second, but what you don't want to do is run the risk of just communicating just to communicate because you feel like action is better than inaction, and then you send mixed signals. And I think we can all relate to this, even from what we heard early on with the COVID stuff from the CDC, when we were hearing one thing one day and another thing the next day, and it was just a lot to take on. Now, I know that they're dealing with a novel virus, and by no means do I want to undermine that. It's very challenging work across the board, but taking time to pause a little bit and kind of get your ducks in a row up front and figure out, what can we actually communicate now? Is it a good idea to wear masks? Is it not a good idea to wear masks? And come with a more aligned approach will help not create as much chaos and confusion when you're dealing with adversity. Be transparent, take time to pause, be timely though too. So inaction is not the goal here. Even though you might take time to listen up front, you will need to take action, timely action as a leader. And when you do know new pieces of information, do not hold on to that information and say, I can't tell the employees yet, they're not ready. No, like, you have to get them something when you can. So find that balance between pausing and action, but do not feel like you need to reactively just talk out of the side of your mouth at all times because you're the leader. This isn't about you. This is about them. Remember that. The last piece is focus on what you can control. So this is something I see a lot too, and you can probably relate to this, but typically what happens, there's a mental mistake people make when something happens and there's a negative outcome. So they associate the event to the negative outcome. So something bad happened, COVID hit, I lost my job, and that's the cause reaction type thing. But what they are missing is how they responded to that event. And that is something you can always control. So there's the equation, E plus R equals O. The event plus the reaction equals the outcome. It's never just the event and the outcome. And with that reaction and how you choose to be strategic about it, I'm not saying that you won't have negative outcomes. You still may have negative outcomes, but you can lessen the severity of those negative outcomes if you react in the proper way. Or maybe you can find the silver lining in a negative event and you spin it into a positive outcome through an opportunity that you find. But all of that is based on how you react as a leader, not letting your fight or flight take control and making irrational or emotional decisions, but being more mindful and strategic about it. Okay, so with that, I want to leave you with some free resources. So if mindfulness is something that you're just starting to dip your toes into, I have a free video on YouTube. It's called Learning How to Grin, G-R-I-N, during a pandemic. The grin method is something that I came up with and developed in the release chapter of my model. It's a 5-minute journaling exercise. Trust me, I used to be the guy who was like, there's no way in hell that I'm gonna be journaling. I'm not that type of guy. I do this regularly and it helps a lot. So if meditation's not for you, if yoga's not for you, if whatever, you need to find something to keep you centered and to keep you mindful through these. Maybe it's the grin method. You can find that on YouTube. The second resource is that leadership assessment, completely free. If you just go to catchingleadership.com, you can take the Carly, which is the Catch and Release Leadership Index. I joke with a lot of people that she's my second wife because I've spent so much time with her. Alicia is my first wife, and she's number one. But anyway, Carly is kind of my other girl, or my other sidekick with this Catching Leadership book. That can be found on my website. The third piece is leading through uncertainty. So I know this talk was called leading through adversity. And you're like, well, leading through uncertainty is just going to be the same thing. There are some of the same slides that I covered here that are covered there, but there's a lot of net new content in here. And leading through uncertainty, this training, it's a 75-minute training. It really focuses more on the mental health aspects. So it talks about, as a leader, how can you catch when you see people going down that downward spiral, and how can you help them change the story so that they can see even hardships as opportunities. So I do talk about some of the different psychological concepts as it relates to negative outcomes. And I think it's really cool if you're into the psychology piece of it. So if you want that training, that one's not public. I hold that link privately, but I will give it to anyone who's on this call today. All you need to do is just email michael@catchingleadership.com. Shoot me a little note, say, Michael, I heard you talk today, really interested in that leading through uncertainty. I'll shoot you over the link, and you can feel free to share that with whoever. If there's someone on your team that you want to give it to, or anyone, happy to just kind of get the word out there to people. As it was mentioned up front about my book, I'm actually running a sale right now through Father's Day, where this is the cheapest the paperback's going to be. It's for $9.99 on Amazon. Just type in Catching Leadership on Amazon. I really enjoyed writing this book, and you can probably tell in this presentation I'm very passionate about this. And yes, I do love fishing, but you don't have to know anything about fishing to take some new leadership concepts away from this. So I would just invite you, if I piqued any interests today about the model or about leadership and from different perspectives or angles, to go snag yourself a copy on Amazon right now for $9.99, or buy one if you already have one. Buy one for someone else, maybe someone on your team or someone who's new to leadership, whoever that might be. Contact information, it's always important when you're starting something new like a business or launching a book. So just whatever media outlets you use. I am on Instagram at Catching Leadership. I have a couple Facebook, I have a page, and I also have a group. If you want to get in on the dialogue, just type in Catching Leadership there. My most active profile is on LinkedIn though. So as you can probably guess, I talk about corporations and organizations and leadership, talent management. So I try and post different things on there too that I can provide value to people who are interested. And then of course the website has some other videos and resources on it as well too. So with that being said, I just thank you for your time this morning. I hope that you took something away from this, and I want to open it up for questions and answers, and then maybe Emma or Justine, we can look through the chat responses too, and we can kind of see what the most common answers were for those two questions too.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Michael. Appreciate it. Anybody who is interested, please put your questions in the chat function, and I will get those read off for everyone so we can answer it. And Emma, I believe you should be able to share any information that you have collected from those answers.
Okay, yeah, can you guys hear me okay? I just want to make sure I'm unmuted.
You're good.
Okay, so I guess I'll just start with the poll that we started off on at the beginning of the presentation. So the most common answer that I saw was the answer for B. So that was, a lot of people were here today to kind of learn about dealing with uncertainty. And then following up with that, the second was concerns with sales and productivity.
Very important topics for sure. With the dealing with the adversity and uncertainty, I've been myself trying to deal with that too as a business owner, and I've been trying to listen to what other people are putting out there in terms of content. And I will tell you that there is no magic formula, and there's no silver bullet to necessarily just overcome it overnight. But what I would say is that when we are challenged the most as human beings is where there's the most growth for you as a leader or as a personal, individual. And so what I would do is maybe for a second, use this time not to try and solve for anything in the moment. Use this time to pause and look at the world in a slightly different view and be super reflective and write things down. What comes to you, whether you're driving into work, whether it's before you go to bed. What now is a priority that wasn't a priority in the past? And that is golden, my friend, because that insight would not have come if you weren't dealing with adversity in this moment. So it's still practice, it's still gaining new knowledge, it's still putting yourself out there and learning, but there is no magic formula for this stuff. The second question, I'm curious too, if there were any themes or trends that came from the catch and release model. So where the greatest opportunity was for people, whether it was new leadership programs or diversity and inclusion, onboarding, coaching, play recognition, or mindfulness/wellness. Curious if there were any trends there, Emma, if you see that in the chat box too.
Yeah, so I went ahead and tallied those up as well. So the most popular response was for step number 4, so coach their cast, having to do with delivering feedback and encouragement to help those leaders develop. And then we had a 3-way tie between number 3, tie their knot, 5, honor their catch, and 6 for release.
Cool. Very, very interesting. So it sounds like there was a good spread there across the model for different things. That coaching piece, it's really, really important. A lot of organizations are hungry for it because whether it's the shifting workforce dynamics in terms of, new generations coming into the workforce, or it's, them wanting to be a little bit more proactive in the development opportunities that they can give their employees. Being a great coach is not easy, but it is paramount to great leadership. And one thing I want all of us to think about as leaders is when it comes to your legacy, even though you may achieve great results, you may bring in millions of dollars for the organization, no one is going to remember that in 10 to 20 years. How many emails you replied to or whatever, all of that stuff, yes, it's important to your job today. What they will remember is the lasting impact that you had on them. And the way to do that is to be an awesome coach, to care, to ask the challenging questions, to provide that good balance of feedback where you recognize strengths, but you're also showing them gaps and helping them work through it. So I would say as a leader, that is something that all of us, organizations included, should try and up our game in, is becoming better coaches.
Michael, I think that's a good segue into our question we have from Michael Clausen. It says, crisis reveals character, and I feel in these times leaders are being judged more than ever. From a leadership perspective, what do you think is the biggest mistake managers made or are making during the pandemic, and how can they turn that into a positive?
Really, really good question. So thank you for that, Michael. Very thoughtful. Well, it goes back to something that I said earlier in terms of wanting to give people answers to things as leaders. And sometimes there is no great answer in that moment. I think a true test of a great leader is being able to admit when they were wrong and being able to listen to others, as opposed to saying it's my way or the highway and we need to figure this out. You're going to listen to me and we all need to move forward from there. So I think there probably were some failures up front with organizations, with managers as they were moving to a virtual environment. Maybe there was a dip in sales or productivity and people felt that pain. I think just being very open and honest as a leader and saying, look, I made mistakes, or maybe I didn't listen as much as I should have up front. I am committed to doing better for this organization, and I want you to know that I have your back. So that's kind of my thought, at least in a nutshell, but I'm sure there's a lot of different things. When you talk about character, there's so many elements of that, of integrity and delegation and all sorts of different things. But that would be my answer, Michael, to that question.
Wonderful. All right. I want to thank Michael so much for being here, and I would like to encourage everyone to go out and check out his book. But for one lucky person today, we are actually going to do a little giveaway, and we are going to get a copy of his book sent to you so you guys can check that out. So I'm actually going to see if hopefully this pulls up for everybody. I've got this wonderful wheel of names here, so let's see who our big winner is. Danielle Shea, congratulations. It looks like you've got yourself a book. Oh no, Wendy, I'm sorry. That's where it landed. All right. Well, there we go. So there's that. Michael, again, I appreciate so much you being here. And we will send out your contact information in case anybody has follow-up questions. Also, this presentation will be made available on the Chamber website here yet this afternoon.
Yeah, one thing I would just throw out there too, Justine, thank you for the opportunity, Dubuque Chamber, really, really appreciate it. Please feel free to reach out to me if anything came up here and you're dealing with it from a personal level or an organizational level. I'm all ears. This is what I do as a consultant, as a coach, is try and help people out. And the other thing I just want to throw out there too is I am going to be back in the area this fall. My wife and I will be back for a wedding in late September too. So if there's anyone or the timing works out with your organization, you want to get a cup of coffee or there's an opportunity, I will be there in the flesh back in Dubuque County too. So wanted people to know that as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And thank everybody again for being here today. Will you please check the Chamber events calendar for upcoming virtual events? And Michael, we hope to have you back sometime soon in person.
Sounds great. Thank you all.
All
Take care.
right, take care, everyone.